It took us nearly 2 years to find the perfect home. After my accident left me with a permanent spinal cord injury, our cramped apartment became a daily obstacle course of narrow doorways and impossible bathroom layouts. Every morning began with the same frustration, trying to navigate spaces never designed for someone in a wheelchair. Sarah and I had saved diligently, making sacrifices most couples never have to consider. We skipped vacations, worked extra shifts, and put every spare dollar toward finding a place where both of us could thrive. For me, that meant wide doorways, accessible countertops, and space to maneuver. For Sarah, it meant room for her Paralympic training equipment. The first time we drove through Oak Ridge Estates, something felt different. The wide streets and newer construction gave me hope. When our realtor showed us the ranch-style home on Maple Lane, I watched Sarah's eyes light up at the spacious garage that could easily be converted into a training space. The master bathroom already had grab bars installed by the previous owners, an elderly couple who had thought ahead. We stood in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through large windows, and Sarah squeezed my hand. "This is it," she whispered. "This is where we start over." The price stretched our budget to its absolute limit, but we made it work. The HOA fees were steep, but we convinced ourselves they were worth it for the immaculately maintained common areas and accessible community pool with a chair lift. Moving day brought the first wave of neighbors to our door. The Johnsons from across the street brought homemade bread. The retired couple next door offered to help unpack. Everyone seemed genuinely welcoming as they watched the movers carefully handle my specialized equipment and Sarah's training gear. The curious glances at my custom wheelchair did not bother me. I had grown accustomed to them. What caught me off guard was how many people recognized Sarah. "Are you Sarah Mitchell, the Paralympic swimmer?" they would ask, eyes wide with recognition. Sarah would smile modestly and confirm, never mentioning her 3 gold medals unless directly asked. On our second day, as I struggled to navigate our new recycling bins, a woman approached from the house at the end of the cul-de-sac. She wore pristine white pants and a blue blouse that matched the HOA logo on her folder. Her smile seemed practiced, but her eyes were sharp and assessing. "Welcome to Oak Ridge Estates. I am Karen Westfield, HOA president." She handed me a thick binder. "Everything you need to know about living here is in this guide. We pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards." I thanked her politely, noticing how her gaze lingered on the temporary ramp we had placed at the front steps. "We will need to approve any permanent modifications to the exterior," she added, her voice still pleasant but firm. "The Architectural Review Committee meets monthly." That evening, as Sarah and I pored over the HOA guidelines, we noted the extensive restrictions on everything from paint colors to plant types. "Some of these rules seem excessive," Sarah remarked, flipping through pages of restrictions. I remained optimistic. They probably just want to maintain property values. Once we submit our accessibility plans with proper documentation, I am sure they will be reasonable. Sarah did not look convinced, but she kissed the top of my head and returned to unpacking our kitchen. That night, I wheeled onto our back patio and breathed in the quiet suburban air. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of permanence, a foundation upon which we could build our future. The worry about HOA approvals was a distant concern compared to the joy of finally having a place to call our own. How could I have known then that our dream home would soon become the battleground for our dignity and rights? The first cracks in our suburban dream appeared 3 weeks after moving in. I had installed a temporary grab bar next to our front door, a simple safety measure that allowed me to navigate the single step more easily. That morning, I found a printed notice taped to our door: "Unapproved modification. Please remove immediately and submit proper documentation for review. The notice seemed unnecessarily formal for such a minor addition. Sarah frowned as she read it over breakfast. We should just submit the paperwork and get it approved properly, she suggested, always the diplomat. I filled out the forms that same day, including a doctor's note explaining the medical necessity of the modification. What I thought would be a simple approval process stretched into weeks of silence. Meanwhile, Sarah established her training routine, converting half our garage into a home gym with specialized equipment. Every morning, Sarah woke at 5 a.m. to train before her coaching job at the local university. I often watched her from the kitchen window, marveling at her discipline. The accident that took my mobility occurred just after we started dating 6 years ago. Instead of walking away from the relationship, Sarah had become my fiercest advocate while simultaneously pushing herself toward Paralympic excellence. One morning, I noticed Karen standing near our property line, taking pictures of our house with her phone. When she saw me watching, she waved with exaggerated friendliness but did not approach. That afternoon, another notice appeared on our door regarding the rubber mats Sarah had placed in the driveway for her outdoor exercises. "This is getting ridiculous," Sarah muttered, tossing the notice onto our counter. "These mats are temporary. We bring them in every day after training." More notices followed, about the height of our mailbox, which I had adjusted to reach from my wheelchair, about the handlebars I had attached to the side of the house, about the portable wheelchair ramp we kept on the porch. Each time, we dutifully filled out request forms. Each time, we received delayed responses or outright denials. The monthly HOA meeting revealed the true scope of our problem. The community center was packed with residents, many of whom nodded politely as we entered. Karen sat at the center of a long table with 4 other board members, a gavel placed importantly before her. When our turn came to address the board about our accessibility requests, Karen's smile never wavered, but her words cut deep. "While we sympathize with your situation, we must consider the aesthetic impact on the community. Perhaps you should have researched our guidelines more thoroughly before purchasing." Several residents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. An older man near the front mumbled, "Come on, Karen, they need these things." But others nodded in agreement with her assessment. We left the meeting defeated. As we reached our car, a woman hurried after us. She introduced herself as Diane from 2 streets over. "I wanted you to know that not everyone agrees with Karen," she whispered, glancing back at the community center. "The previous owners of your house had similar issues. They ended up moving because of her constant harassment." At home that night, Sarah paced our living room, her frustration palpable. "This is discrimination, plain and simple," she insisted. "They cannot deny reasonable accessibility modifications." I watched her tighten her hands into fists, then consciously relax them, a technique she used before competitions. "We just moved in," I reminded her. "Maybe we need to build some goodwill first, show them we are good neighbors." Sarah nodded reluctantly, but I could see the competitive fire in her eyes, the same determination that had carried her through countless rehabilitation sessions after her childhood accident and onto Paralympic podiums. "We will play nice," she agreed. "For now." Neither of us realized then just how quickly playing nice would become impossible, or how soon our commitment to our new home would be tested in ways we never imagined. My wheelchair represented more than just mobility. It was freedom custom-built for my body and needs. After trying multiple models during rehabilitation, I had finally found one that worked perfectly for me. Lightweight carbon fiber frame, specially calibrated wheels with push rims positioned precisely for my arm length, and custom seating that prevented pressure sores during long periods of sitting. Insurance had covered only the basic model. Sarah and I paid the substantial difference for the upgrades that made daily life possible. Due to the layout of our home and the need to keep it charged, the most practical place to store the chair when not in use was on our covered front porch, tucked neatly beside the door. This allowed me to transfer directly from car to chair without Sarah having to retrieve it from inside the house. 6 weeks after moving in, an official violation notice appeared on our door. Unauthorized storage of personal items in front of residents, it proclaimed in bold lettering. The notice cited HOA Covenant Section 12.3, "No personal property shall be stored visible from the street." I immediately called the HOA office to explain. "This is not personal property in the conventional sense," I told the secretary. "This is medical equipment I need for basic mobility." "You will need to take that up with the board," she replied dispassionately. "I just processed the violations." That evening, I drafted a detailed letter explaining the necessity of the wheelchair's location, attaching supporting documentation from my doctor and physical therapist. I also included printouts of the Americans with Disabilities Act guidelines regarding reasonable accommodations. Sarah helped me research relevant legal precedents to strengthen our case. 3 days later, Karen herself appeared at our door, clipboard in hand. She surveyed our porch with pursed lips. "Mr. Mitchell, while I understand your condition raise certain equipment, our covenants are quite clear. The wheelchair cannot remain on the porch. Perhaps you could build a small storage shed, after proper approval, of course." "Karen, this is not a lawn mower or bicycle," I explained, working to keep my voice calm. "This is specialized medical equipment that I need immediate access to. Building a shed would create an additional barrier to my independence." Her smile remained fixed. "Rules are rules. If we make exceptions, where would it end? The Reynolds would want their kayaks visible, the Thompsons would leave out sports equipment. You understand?" "Actually, I do not understand," I replied, feeling my patience waning. "Federal law protects reasonable accommodations for disabilities. This clearly qualifies." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Well, if you want to make this a legal matter, that is your choice. But until then, violation notices will continue to be issued, with escalating fines as outlined in Section 18.4. That night, Sarah and I discussed our options. "We could move the chair inside each night," Sarah suggested, though we both knew this would create significant hardship. Our doorways were just wide enough for the chair to pass through, making it cumbersome to bring in and out multiple times daily. Over the next 2 weeks, we received 3 more violation notices, each threatening larger fines. I sent registered letters to the HOA board detailing how their position violated both federal law and basic human decency. The responses were generic form letters reiterating the covenants. The situation came to a head on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled for later that day. Sarah had left early for a training session with her Paralympic team. When my caregiver departed after helping me with morning routines, I settled in to work from my home office. At 2:00 p.m., I wheeled to the front door to retrieve my chair and head to my appointment. The porch was empty. At first, I thought Sarah might have moved it, though that made no sense. I called her immediately, but she confirmed she had not touched it. Panic rising, I managed to get the door open and pull myself onto the porch using the railings, scanning the yard desperately. The rain fell steadily as I clung to the porch column, stranded. Our neighbor Tom was retrieving his mail and noticed my distress. "Everything okay?" he called, jogging over with concern on his face. "My wheelchair is gone," I explained, the reality sinking in. "It was here this morning." Tom helped me back inside and offered to drive me around the neighborhood to look for it. But without my chair, transferring to his car would be nearly impossible. Instead, he volunteered to search himself while I made some calls. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a text from another neighbor, Marissa. "Thought you should see this." Attached was a photo showing Karen Westfield loading what was unmistakably my wheelchair into the back of her white SUV earlier that day. My hands shook with a mixture of disbelief and rage as I called Sarah. How could someone take medical equipment that was so obviously essential? What kind of person would strand a disabled man in his own home? "She did what?" Sarah's voice cracked with incredulity when I explained. "I am leaving practice right now. Do not worry, we will get it back." As I waited for Sarah to return, I stared out the window at the rain, feeling a vulnerability I had not experienced since the early days after my accident. My independence, so carefully reconstructed over years of adaptation and determination, had been stolen along with that chair. The violation went beyond property. It struck at the core of my dignity and autonomy. My doctor's appointment came and went, impossible to attend. All because someone decided that neighborhood aesthetics mattered more than my basic human needs. Sarah arrived home in record time, rainwater dripping from her jacket as she burst through the door. Her expression transformed from concern to controlled fury as she took in my situation, stranded in our living room armchair without my mobility aid. "Tell me exactly what happened," she demanded, kneeling before me and taking my hands in hers. I explained everything: the missing wheelchair, the neighbor's photo of Karen taking it, the missed doctor's appointment. With each detail, I watched something shift behind Sarah's eyes. The diplomatic athlete was receding, replaced by something fiercer. "We are going to get your chair back, right now." She helped me into our old transport wheelchair, a clunky hospital model we kept as an emergency backup. It lacked the custom features that made independent mobility possible, but at least I could leave the house with Sarah's assistance. As she pushed me toward Karen's house at the end of the cul-de-sac, Sarah spoke quietly about strategy. Many people underestimated Sarah based on her gentle demeanor, forgetting the steel beneath. I had watched her journey from the hospital bed after a childhood car accident crushed her legs, through years of surgeries and rehabilitation, to the Paralympic podium. Her gold medals were not won through talent alone, but through a relentless refusal to accept limitations. Karen answered her door with the practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. That smile faltered when she saw us on her porch, rain still coming down around us. "May I help you?" she asked, her gaze flickering to the transport chair. "You have my wheelchair," I stated flatly. "I need it back immediately." Karen's expression hardened. That equipment was in violation of clearly stated HOA rules. After multiple warnings, it was removed from community view as allowed in our covenants regarding abandoned property. Sarah stepped forward, her voice dangerously calm. "That wheelchair is custom medical equipment worth over $12,000. It was not abandoned. You have stolen essential medical equipment from a disabled resident." "I did not steal anything," Karen insisted, color rising in her cheeks. "As HOA president, I am empowered to enforce our rules. The chair was repeatedly left outside despite multiple notices." "Where is it now?" Sarah demanded. "It is secure in my garage. It will be returned when proper arrangements have been made for its storage out of public view." Sarah pulled out her phone, showing the text with the photo. "This is theft of medical equipment. We can involve the police or you can return it now." Karen crossed her arms. "Go ahead and call them. Our covenants clearly state." "Your covenants do not override federal law," Sarah interrupted, her voice still controlled but vibrating with intensity. "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects reasonable accommodations. Taking someone's wheelchair is not just an HOA violation, it is a potential criminal offense." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Karen's face, but she quickly recovered. "You signed the covenants when you purchased your home. If you cannot abide by our community standards, perhaps Oak Ridge Estates is not the right neighborhood for you." We left without the wheelchair. In the rain, Sarah pushed me home in silence, her breathing measured in the way it always was before competitions, controlling the emotion, channeling it into focus. Inside, Sarah helped me transfer to the couch, then pulled out her laptop. "This ends now," she said, fingers flying across the keyboard as she researched ADA violations and disability rights laws. Later that evening, as I watched her making calls to former Paralympic teammates, many now working in disability advocacy, I saw the full transformation. Sarah had always been my advocate, but now she had become a warrior. On our wall hung her 3 gold medals, testament to her ability to overcome obstacles and outperform expectations. The woman who had stood on podiums representing her country was now preparing for a different kind of competition, one with even more personal stakes. "She picked the wrong family to bully," Sarah said as she hung up the phone. She sat beside me on the couch, taking my hand. "Do you remember what my coach always said before big meets?" I nodded. "Pressure creates diamonds." "Exactly." Sarah squeezed my hand. "Karen thinks she has all the power because of some HOA bylaws. She has no idea what real power looks like, the kind that comes from fighting your way back when everything is stacked against you." That night we documented everything, every notice, every communication, every denial of our reasonable requests. Sarah reached out to 3 different disability rights attorneys while I drafted a formal complaint to the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Around midnight, a text arrived from Diane, our sympathetic neighbor. "Several of us are disgusted by what happened. Let us know how we can help." As we finally prepared for bed, Sarah paused beside her Paralympic medals displayed on our bedroom wall. "You know, winning those was hard," she said quietly. "But this, fighting for our right to simply exist in our own home, this should not be a battle anyone has to fight." Her expression hardened with resolve. "But if it is a battle Karen wants, she will get won." Our dining room transformed into command central over the next 48 hours. The polished oak table disappeared beneath printed HOA bylaws, ADA regulations, and property law documents. Sarah approached the situation with the same methodical precision she brought to athletic training, identifying objectives, analyzing obstacles, developing strategies. "We need to understand exactly what we are fighting," she explained, highlighting sections of the HOA covenant. "Some of these regulations directly contradict federal protections for disabled residents." Sarah reached out to her Paralympic network first. By midday, we had received calls from 2 attorneys specializing in disability rights, both eager to take our case pro bono. Elizabeth Chen, herself a former Paralympic archer, arrived that afternoon with a legal pad and fierce determination. "What happened to you is textbook discrimination," Elizabeth confirmed, reviewing our documentation. "The confiscation of mobility equipment is particularly egregious. We have grounds for multiple actions here." While Elizabeth drafted legal notices, Sarah made another series of calls, this time to local news contacts she had developed through years of Paralympic coverage. She was careful not to commit to any interviews yet, but ensured they understood the story developing in our community. Media pressure is a last resort, she explained to me, but sometimes the threat of public exposure is more effective than actual exposure. By evening, our neighbor Diane arrived with unexpected reinforcements, 4 other homeowners from the community, each with their own stories of Karen's overreach. Martin, a retired teacher, described receiving violation notices for his wife's oxygen tank being visible through their front window. Jessie, a young mother, had been cited for the temporary wheelchair ramp installed when her mother visited after surgery. She selectively enforces rules against anyone she considers undesirable, Martin explained bitterly. The board rarely questions her decisions. The next morning brought another ally, Robert Turner, the former vice president of the HOA who had resigned 6 months earlier. Karen has been consolidating power for years, he explained, reviewing our strategy notes. She replaced board members with personal friends and rewrote bylaws to expand presidential authority. With Robert's insider knowledge, we mapped out the HOA leadership structure and identified potential allies among the remaining board members. 2, we learned, had privately expressed concern about Karen's methods but feared challenging her authority. While our coalition grew, Sarah continued her regular training regimen with even greater intensity. I recognized the focused energy that always preceded her biggest competitions, the controlled breathing, the visualization exercises, the mental preparation for confrontation. Elizabeth returned on day 3 with formal legal documents prepared. "We are filing 3 separate actions," she explained. "First, an emergency injunction demanding immediate return of the wheelchair. Second, a formal complaint citing violations of the Fair Housing Act and Americans with Disabilities Act. Third, a civil action against Karen personally for theft and emotional distress." The certified letters were prepared, the documents signed. Sarah studied them carefully, nodding with satisfaction. "When do we deliver these?" "Tomorrow morning," Elizabeth confirmed. "I suggest we bring witnesses." That night, our temporary allies gathered again in our living room for final preparations. We reviewed every detail of our plan: who would speak, what evidence would be presented, how we would respond to various scenarios. Robert brought aerial property maps showing similar violations that had gone unenforced throughout the neighborhood. In our bedroom later, Sarah retrieved our old transport wheelchair from the garage. "We will need this tomorrow," she said, checking the brakes and wiping dust from the frame. Then she pulled something else from the closet, the jacket she had worn at her last Paralympic ceremony, with the national emblem embroidered on the breast pocket. "Is that really necessary?" I asked, recognizing the calculated nature of the choice. She looked at me steadily. "Perception matters in any competition. Karen needs to understand exactly who she is facing." She laid the jacket out carefully next to her professional outfit for the morning. I watched my wife prepare for battle with the same methodical focus she brought to world-class athletic competition. "You know," I said quietly, "when we bought this house, I never imagined you would need to fight so hard just for us to live here with dignity." Sarah crossed the room and took my hands in hers. "This fight is not just for us," she replied, her eyes fierce with conviction. "It is for every person who has been bullied by someone who abuses their authority. It is for everyone who has been told they do not belong because they are different." The next morning dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the rainy day when my wheelchair had been taken. Sarah dressed with deliberate care, professional slacks and blouse, her Paralympic jacket a calculated statement of identity and achievement. As our allies arrived one by one, I felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected community that had formed around our struggle. Elizabeth arrived last, legal documents in a professional portfolio. She surveyed our assembled group with approval. "Is everyone ready?" she asked, her voice calm but charged with purpose. Sarah nodded, her expression set with the same determination I had seen. Before she entered Olympic arenas, "More than ready," she answered, helping me into the transport chair. "It is time to take back what is ours." Our small procession made its way down the street toward Karen's house at precisely 10:00 a.m. Sarah pushed my transport wheelchair at the front, flanked by Elizabeth in her professional suit and Robert in his HOA board member polo shirt from his time on the board. Behind us walked 6 neighbors, each representing a different household that had experienced Karen's overreach. Karen's house stood at the prime location in the cul-de-sac, larger than most, with impeccable landscaping and a 3-car garage. As we approached her perfectly maintained brick walkway, I felt Sarah's grip tighten slightly on the wheelchair handles, the only outward sign of her tension. Diane recorded video discreetly from a legal distance as Elizabeth rang the doorbell. Curtains twitched in neighboring houses. Our presence had not gone unnoticed in the usually quiet morning hours. Karen opened the door with her standard practice smile, which instantly vanished at the sight of our assembled group. Her eyes darted from face to face, lingering momentarily on Elizabeth's professional attire and portfolio. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn. Sarah stepped forward, professional and composed. "We are here to retrieve the medical equipment you unlawfully removed from our property, and to address the pattern of discriminatory enforcement of HOA regulations." Karen's posture stiffened. "This is harassment. I acted within my authority as HOA president." Elizabeth moved smoothly into position. "Ms. Westfield, I am Elizabeth Chen, attorney representing the Mitchells. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Fair Housing Act, your actions constitute discrimination against a protected class and theft of essential medical equipment." She opened her portfolio and removed the legal documents. "These papers outline the multiple violations you have committed. We are prepared to file them today unless the wheelchair is immediately returned and a written acknowledgement of discriminatory practices is provided." Karen scanned the first page, her expression shifting from dismissive to concerned as she registered the legal letterhead and formal language. "This is absurd. The HOA covenant clearly states." "Federal law supersedes HOA covenants," Elizabeth interrupted firmly. "Furthermore, selective enforcement against residents with disabilities constitutes a separate violation." Karen's gaze moved to the neighbors assembled behind us. "What does any of this have to do with all of you?" Martin stepped forward. "We are here as witnesses to a pattern of discriminatory enforcement that has affected multiple households." For the first time, Karen appeared genuinely flustered. "This is ridiculous. The wheelchair was removed according to proper procedures for covenant violations." "Where is it?" Sarah demanded, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect in international athletic competitions. Karen hesitated, clearly calculating her options. Finally, she gestured toward the garage. "It is stored safely. I was going to return it once proper arrangements were made for storage." "Show us," Sarah insisted. With visible reluctance, Karen led us around to her garage side door. She punched a code into the keypad, and the door swung open to reveal a cavernous, perfectly organized three-car garage. In the corner sat my wheelchair, but not as I had last seen it. The customized seat cushion had been removed and leaned against a wall. One wheel was detached and propped beside it. The battery pack for power assistance had been disconnected and placed on a shelf. Sarah inhaled sharply. I felt a cold wave of shock and anger wash over me. This was not simple storage. The chair had been deliberately disassembled. "What have you done?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. Karen waved dismissively. "It needed to be compactly stored. Everything is there." "This is specialized medical equipment," Sarah said, her control slipping for the first time. "It is calibrated precisely for specific medical needs. You cannot just take it apart like furniture." Elizabeth immediately documented the condition with her phone camera. This constitutes willful damage to medical equipment, which elevates the seriousness of this situation considerably. Karen's demeanor changed abruptly as she realized the strengthening of our position. "I was only enforcing the rules everyone agreed to follow. The board will back me on this." As if on cue, two cars pulled into Karen's driveway. The vice president and treasurer of the HOA board, apparently summoned by Karen via text when we first arrived. They approached with confused expressions, taking in our assembled group. "What is happening here?" asked Gerald, the vice president. Robert stepped forward to greet his former colleagues. "Gerald, Patricia Karen confiscated a resident's wheelchair and has disassembled it, causing potential damage to essential medical equipment." Patricia's eyes widened as she peered into the garage. "You took his wheelchair. Karen, you said you were handling a standard violation." The dynamic shifted palpably as Karen realized her support was crumbling. It was left on the porch repeatedly after multiple notices. "It is a wheelchair, Karen," Gerald interrupted, clearly distressed. "Not a bicycle or lawn furniture. The board never authorized this." Sarah had heard enough. With the calm, focused movements I had seen countless times before competitions, she entered the garage and began examining each piece of my disassembled wheelchair. "The wheel alignment is off," she noted, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "The custom seat cushion has been compressed incorrectly. The battery was not properly disconnected." Each observation was another indictment. Then, with the same strength that had propelled her to Paralympic gold, Sarah began methodically gathering the components. When Karen moved as if to stop her, Elizabeth stepped between them, legal documents still in hand. "I strongly advise against any further interference," Elizabeth warned quietly. The neighbors who had accompanied us formed a supportive semicircle as Sarah assembled what she could of the wheelchair. Some components would need professional attention to restore properly. When she had collected everything, Sarah wheeled the partially assembled chair out to the driveway where I waited. Our eyes met, and in that moment I saw both her fierce protective love and her controlled rage at the injustice. Karen followed, attempting to regain control of the situation. "You cannot just take that. There are procedures." "We just did," Sarah interrupted, her voice carrying across the now crowded driveway. Several more neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by the unusual gathering. And now everyone here knows exactly what kind of leadership this community has been under. Gerald and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable glances before Gerald cleared his throat. "The board will need to convene an emergency meeting about this situation." Elizabeth handed him a copy of our legal documentation. "I suggest you review these materials before that meeting. My clients have grounds for significant legal action against both the HOA and Ms. Westfield personally." As we prepared to leave, Sarah turned to address the gathered neighbors one final time. This was never just about a wheelchair being stored on a porch. This is about the right of disabled people to exist in their own homes with dignity and independence. This is about a community that either stands for inclusivity and compassion, or one that allows discrimination to hide behind rules and regulations. Karen stood alone by her garage door, her authority visibly diminished as board members and neighbors distanced themselves both physically and symbolically. As Sarah pushed both wheelchairs back toward our home, me in the transport chair, my damaged custom chair rolled alongside, she spoke clearly for all to hear. This is not over. This was never about a wheelchair. This is about dignity and rights that cannot be confiscated. The emergency HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following evening. Word spread quickly throughout Oak Ridge Estates, and the community center overflowed with residents. People stood along walls and crowded the doorway, a level of attendance unprecedented in neighborhood history. Sarah and I arrived early, my wheelchair now partially repaired but still requiring professional restoration. The damage to the custom components would cost thousands to fix properly. Elizabeth sat beside us, legal documents arranged neatly before her. Karen arrived last, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. The meeting began with Gerald, the vice president, calling for order and outlining the serious nature of recent events. This board must address actions taken that may have violated federal law and exposed our HOA to significant liability, he announced, his expression grave. Elizabeth presented our case methodically, displaying photographs of the disassembled wheelchair and citing relevant sections of disability rights legislation. When she finished, the room remained silent for several long moments. Then, one by one, neighbors began to speak, not just our allies who had accompanied us to Karen's house, but others who had remained silent through years of similar treatment. An elderly woman described being cited for her arthritis railings. A family detailed fines received for their child's therapeutic sensory equipment in the backyard. Karen attempted to defend herself, citing covenant enforcement procedures, but her words fell flat against the mounting evidence of discriminatory application. The board members exchanged troubled glances. I move that we accept Karen's resignation as HOA president, effective immediately, Patricia finally stated, her voice steady despite Karen's glare. The motion passed unanimously among board members, with overwhelming support from attending homeowners. Karen departed without speaking, her carefully constructed authority dismantled in a single evening. In the days that followed, our community began a remarkable transformation. The new interim leadership, headed by Gerald and Patricia, immediately formed an accessibility committee with Sarah invited as a founding member. Their first action was to comprehensively review all previous violation notices through a lens of accessibility and medical necessity. A wheelchair repair specialist assessed the damage to my chair, confirming that several custom components had been compromised. When neighbors learned the cost of repairs, far beyond our budget after the recent home purchase, something unexpected happened. Diane started a community fund to cover the expenses. This is our way of making things right, she explained as donations flowed in, many from residents who had previously stood silently during Karen's reign. Your fight showed us what we had allowed our community to become. 3 weeks after the confrontation, a new wheelchair arrived, not just repaired but upgraded with features that increased my independence even further. The manufacturer, hearing our story through Sarah's Paralympic connections, had contributed significantly to the improvements. The following month, Sarah leveraged her platform as a Paralympic athlete to host an Accessibility Awareness Day at our community center. Residents of all ages attended workshops on disability etiquette, inclusive design, and the legal rights of disabled individuals. Children tried navigating obstacle courses in wheelchairs, gaining new perspective on accessibility challenges. The most profound changes came in community governance. The HOA bylaws underwent comprehensive revision, with explicit protections for accessibility modifications and medical equipment. The Architectural Review Committee was restructured to include a disability rights advocate, ensuring that all future decisions would consider accessibility needs. As for Karen, we learned she had listed her house for sale and moved to another community.